Hello and welcome to my channel. Hi, I'm Wendy Haney. Today I'm going to show you how to make this quilt block called Aunt Sukey's Choice. Yep, I've decided I'm going to try and do a quilt with a variety of blocks that all have to do with women. Your aunt, your sister. I did Sister's Choice block several months ago. Grandmother. I've discovered I can find a ton of quilt blocks having to do with women. So stay tuned as I figure them out, and hopefully I plan my fabric so that they'll work nicely together. So this is Aunt Sukey's Choice. I am working on a 12-inch finished block. So ultimately, it's kind of like 6 columns. So we've got 2-inch finished blocks, and then this is 4 to get our 12. And then we got a big honkin' block in the middle. You can find this in a variety of different ways and different fabrics and different looks. So I got out my electric quilt and started playing with it to see what I liked. I had debated about going the same color, maybe the orange in the middle, but when I put the blocks together into a quilt layout, then I get these additional big, I'm gonna just say it, big blobs of colors as we put these blocks together. So I decided to go alternate colors in my corners. And at the end, I'll show you a picture of what this can look like in a completed layout of a quilt. Okay, so I've got my light orange for my background, and then I've got my teal, purple, and then my bright dark orange in the middle. And I'll admit, wasn't sure about that, but you know, I think it's gonna be fine. I didn't find another color that I liked in the middle as much. Okay, so what do we need for this? For our pale yellow, we need our rectangles, which are 2.5 by 4.5, our 2.5-inch squares to go with it. And then this actually, you're looking at it going, oh, that's a lot of flying geese and piecing. But you know what? We're gonna make these flying geese 4 at a time. So this is gonna go together pretty dang quickly. So in that case, there's our 2.5 by 4.5 for our orange and our 2.5-inch squares. For our flying geese, we need the corners. And because we're doing it 4 at a time, I've got 3-inch cuts of my corners for my flying geese. And in a minute, I'm going to explain how I got the sizes for there. For our purple, well, we're doing 4 at a time. So I'm doing a big 5.5-inch square of my purple for my flying geese, and then my 2 little corner squares for my 2.5. My teal, I have the same thing because I've got the middle of a flying geese, and my 2 corner of my block are 2.5-inch squares. And then here, I need corners for this purple flying geese. So I've got 4 3-inch of my teal, and then I've got a 4.5-inch square of my dark orange. Now, I know I went through that quickly. There's a link below for a template that's going to give you the sizes to cut all the different pieces of fabric that you need. Okay, so I said we're going to do our flying geese 4 at a time. Get these out of the way. There we go. So our flying geese, we need a purple teal combination and a teal orange combination. What you do to figure out your sizes is you take your finished width of your flying geese. So our finished width is a 4-inch. So this is a 4-inch by 2-inch finished size flying geese. So we're gonna add 1.25 inches to our finished size, and that means we get a 5.25-inch block. Well, you can do it that size and trim it up and have no problems at all if everything is perfect. I like to be able to have a little wiggle room in case I shift my fabric a little. So I do a 5.5. So I'm adding 1.5 inches to the finished size of my flying geese, and that's the big size block. So I've got a 5.5 inch block of both my teal and my purple. Those are the center, the largest piece in my flying geese. Then for our corners, you take your finished size height and you add 7/8 of an inch. Who wants to deal with 7/8 of an inch? Well, hell, just update it to 3 inches. So I've got 3-inch squares. What I would suggest you do is do one to start with and see if that works for you. If you need a little bit more wiggle room, then increase these squares to 3 1/8 if you like to deal with the 8s, 3 1/4. You kind of do you and what works for you. So this is what I found. So this way, I'm going to do it this way with a little wiggle room to trim, so I can also show you how to trim them up. It's not that difficult. Okay, so we're going to set those aside and do those later. To start with, we're going to work on our corner squares here, which means, first of all, let's get our corner squares attached to our background square. Easy peasy. Take our 2.5 inch squares, and yes, I'm working with batiks, but you know we're always working with right sides together. So just put all of your 2.5 inch squares, one on top of each other, on top of your background, and then we're going to stitch 1/4 inch and then press them. Now that we have those together, we're going to tack on our 4.5 inch. Now, we need to make sure that we have things right. I don't think, given the fact that we've got one set in each corner, but there we go. So take your pairs of squares and put them on top of your 4.5 by 2.5 inch background fabric and pin those right sides together. Okay, and then you're going to take these to the sewing machine and, yep, you guessed it, 1/4 inch on the long side, and then get those pressed, and then we have our corner squares ready to go, and then we can tackle our flying geese. And there we have our 4 corner squares. Now, you do want to be careful when you put your fabrics together and stitch on the right side, because oops, I put this over top of there and stitch there. It doesn't quite come out right. So be careful when you lay it out and pin them to make sure they're coming out right, so your corner colors are actually in the corner. Very helpful. Okay, we're going to set those aside. Now we're going to work with our flying geese. We're going to do a teal and your background fabric, and we've got our purple and our purple with our teal corner squares. Okay, we're going to do them both at the same time. It's the simplest thing to do. So you're going to take your 3-inch squares and we are going to mark them. If you have a handy dandy half-inch ruler that's got our center line to be in the middle for 1/4 inch, you can put that corner to corner, matching up the center line, and draw on the edge. Flip it around. My pencil wasn't doing a very good job when I was trying to do it in one swipe. And draw your other line. If you don't have a quilter's magic wand, you can just use your OmniGrid ruler and put your 1/4 inch line corner to corner, and then mark on the edge, flip it, do the same thing. So essentially, you have a line, 2 lines, 1/4 inch off center for both of them. You're going to want to mark all of your background fabric colors. There's 4 of those. And then go ahead and mark your other color. For me, it's my teal. Get all 4 of those matched. All 4 of those marked. My words today. Then what you're going to do is take your larger squares, and we're going to put our smaller squares, our 3-inch squares, in the middle. So to start with, you just need 2 of them. And you're going to put those on here so that your lines that you just marked match between the 2 blocks, and they go corner to corner. And I found that it works a lot better to mark these squares, small squares, before you put them on the larger block, rather than trying to do it once you place them. Okay, pin those up, and then go to the sewing machine, and you're going to stitch on each of the lines. And yep, I'm going to get that so it lines up there. You're going to stitch on each of the line. I have a tendency to hedge a little bit towards the inside with my foot and my needle, so it's just a tad on the inside. That gives you, well, just a little bit of more wiggle room to trim up. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. I did the exact same thing on my purple and teal one, and I actually have already sewn it. Once that is sewn, you're going to come back, and that ruler's not long enough. Either do it with the scissors at the ironing board, or come back and use a ruler and cut right down the middle. Okay, then you're going to open these up and press towards your little your little geese here, your flying things. Okay, you're going to do that and finger press. You're going to do that and press all of those. So then you'll have 4 of these. Your background fabric with your, in my case, my teal and my purple. Then you're going to take your 2 remaining 3-inch blocks for each of your color combinations, and you're going to put that in the remaining corner here, where you've got your lines from the corner into the center. I'm going to put that on there, pin it to make sure it stays, and then you're going to go and stitch once again on the lines. So go ahead and do that with all of these, and then you'll end up with, well, then what we're going to do is we're going to cut in the middle again, and we're going to have our 4 of each color combination flying geese. How fast was that, huh? Oh, we do have to trim them up, and I will show you how to do that. And I'm going to step back here just 1 minute. I wanted to tell you, so when I pressed these, the pressing of this combination really doesn't matter. I just pressed whichever one's darkest. In this case, though, I pressed towards the one without any seams. It makes a nice cleaner press. Okay, go get those flying geese sewn up. I have all of my flying geese sewn, and here's the last piece where we're going to cut it. Now make sure you don't just finger press these before you put on this last block. Make sure you actually press these and then put on the last block. And then once you've got those stitched, you're going to cut them in half. And look at there! You have 2 flying geese. So if you do these for each of your sets, you're going to end up with 4 flying geese of each color combination that you need. There we go. Pretty quick, right? Okay, I'm going to take one of them that I've already pressed and show you how to trim it up. I don't use a special ruler for trimming up. What I do is I put the flying geese where the goose, the beak, I don't know, whatever is pointed towards me. I get my OmniGrid ruler out that has a 45-degree angle, and I put the 45-degree angle here. The points you need to pay attention is here, that needs to be 1/4 of an inch from that point to the bottom. So you've got to have enough to trim to where 2.5 inches, I should say. And over here, where you're going to trim, you want to have your ruler such that your 4.5 mark is on that line and your 2.5 is up here, because this is going to be trimmed 2.5 by 4.5. Okay, your angle goes on your seam. I turn it and adjust it a little bit so that my 4.5 inch where I'm going to eventually trim is right there on that corner of that seam. My corner is there on the seam, and down here I can tell it's 1/4 of an inch from that point to the 2.5 inch line. And then I have enough. In this case, I don't have a lot to trim over there on that side on the left. So I must have twisted this one just a tad. This is why I like to do them slightly oversized. Then you turn it around. This is now your straight line, so you should be able to line up your 4.5 and your 2.5 on it. You should see that you've now have 1/4 inch from here to the top of the ruler, and your 2.5 inch hits there in this corner. And there we go, and we make the last trim. You're going to do that. There you've got a perfectly trimmed 2.5 by 4.5 inch flying goose. Go ahead and do that with all the rest of them, and then we're ready to put the block together. Now we just need to lay it out so we can sew the rows together. I always start with the big square in the middle. I put my corner squares on, making sure I have opposite colors. And then the same up here, opposite, or actually the same color, opposite corners. Okay. And now we need our flying geese. And I usually have a template out that's colored so I can look at it and go, okay, yeah, this is where things go. So our dark, our purple, all face the center. And then our other flying geese with the coordinating color here and the background go on the outside. Woohoo! There we go. So now, easiest thing to do is get your pairs of flying geese sewn together. I like to put my inside flying geese on the top, so I've got my point right there that I can make sure I don't cut off. And I am going to pin this. Scissors with my pins. Okay, so you're going to do that for each of these. Pin and then stitch 1/4 of an inch on the side with the point. And then you've got those squares together, and then we can do our rows. And there we go. What I did here was I pressed these to the larger triangle. Yep, we've got a little bulk there, but I think I felt it was going to be more if I pressed them that way. The other nice thing about pressing them that direction is these, as long as we're working in rows this way and you put together things later, these two blocks, the seams are opposite each other because we press this to the larger rectangle. This is going to that one. So when we come to sew those together, the seams there will nest nicely. So now what we're going to do is we're literally going to sew these in rows, and then we'll sew the rows together. So in this case, I like to have my seams on top. So I'm going to take this one here, and I'm going to pin it so I don't lose track of the edge that I'm going to be sewing. Okay. This one's easy peasy. We're going to have that orange in the middle. And this one that direction. Okay, so you're going to go and do that and get those 3 blocks sewn together. Getting closer. Got these pairs sewed together, and what I did was I pressed towards the block without any seams. So this got pressed that way to the rectangle, so did that one, and this one got pressed there, which is very nice because once again, as we put the rows together, they're going to nest nicely. Okay, guess what we're gonna do? Yep, the same thing. I like my seams on top, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna do that. And I'm going to pin them right now so that I don't confuse myself on which seam I'm stitching, because yes, I have a tendency to do that when I pick them up later. And then you're going to go to the sewing machine and, you guessed it, sew a 1/4 inch from the edge on all 3 sets. Now that we have our rows together, well, you guessed it, we're going to put them together. This is really the first time that you're really matching seams. All the rest of them, that's what's really slick about this block. There's no matching of seams in any of these rows. You just need to make sure you don't chop off your point on your flying geese. Here, though, you've got your rows that you need to match seams. Okay, so 6 one, 6 the other, and because of the way we pressed, your seams should be able to nest. I like to start in the middle. I start there and kind of nest my seams there and get this one right and straight. Where'd that pin go? And pin, and then do the other one over here. I kind of look there and nest my seams to make sure they're straight. Okay. Get that pinned. And then I just kind of work my way out. And getting everything eased in there nicely, pinning my seams first. And then, yep, this one's a little off on the edge, I guess. Well, okay, we're gonna make it work. I am not perfect, so there you have it. This one looks nicer on this side. There we go. So I've got all that eased in there. And we're gonna go sew a 1/4 inch. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna come back, you're gonna open it up, and you don't need to press anything yet. Open that up, and then we're going to do this, and I'm actually going to pin this together right now because I'm here before I take it to the machine, because then I can do both of those seams at the same time without getting up and coming back here to pin it. So I'm going to pin this nicely that way, and I can stitch that seam and that seam, making sure 1/4 inch from the edges, making sure I don't get anything caught in the middle. And then we've got a finished block. And I'll show you an example of what this can look like in a quilt. Voila! There we go. Isn't that a pretty block? Aunt Sukey's choice. Yep. Now, because of the way we pressed our seams and did things in rows to put it together, you can pinwheel your corners. Worked out really, really nicely to eliminate bulk. So each of our corners in our rows have been pinwheeled. Okay, there we go. Now, here's an example of what it can look like when you put it all together. And so if I show you this with my other block I did, if you put them next to each other with your coordinating blocks opposite of each other, that means you end up with a nice 4-patch of teal and purple. Now, with that said, if you wanted, you could put them together this way, and then you have a big set of 4 patches that's all the same color of your purple. You know what? You could do whatever you wanted. Offset, yeah. A lot of different things you can do, and depending on how you lay out the colors, it's endless. There you go. I hope you enjoyed it. Have fun with it, because it does go together really quickly with doing your flying geese 4 at a time. Take care, and thank you so much for watching.